The sun had barely crested the horizon when the dust-laden town of Red River came alive with the clatter of hoofs, the creak of wagon wheels, and the low hum of anxious voices. It was a town in the throes of a festival, one that promised bargains, revelry, and a show of wealth and influence. At the center of it all was the so-called bride auction, a spectacle that drew traders, settlers, and opportunists from miles around. The idea was grotesque yet strangely accepted by some in the town. A man could choose a bride, for free, if he had the courage, the presence, and the wealth to impress. At the heart of the square, shackled and standing with a quiet dignity that belied her situation, was a young Comanche girl. Her dark eyes surveyed the crowd with a mixture of defiance and resignation. Dust clung to her hair, her wrists bore the heavy weight of iron, and yet there was something in her posture, a proud tilt of the chin, a fire in the gaze, that set her apart from the fear that gripped so many in such circumstances. The cowboy who rode into town that morning was not a man of frivolity or ostentation. He was called Elijah Turner, a man known as much for his quiet bravery as for the steely compassion he carried under a weathered exterior. His face was sun-browned, his boots scuffed from years of crossing plains and rivers, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, had seen both beauty and brutality in equal measure. He had not come to the town for the festival or for a bride, he had come for a purpose that was his alone, though none in Red River could have guessed what it was. As he dismounted, the chatter of the crowd hushed slightly, curiosity mingled with unease. Elijah's reputation preceded him, he had a way of drawing attention not with words, but with a presence that demanded consideration. The auctioneer, a portly man with a voice as coarse as gravel, cleared his throat. "Step right up, gentlemen and ladies," he barked. "Choose any bride for free. Make your pick before the day is done, and she's yours. Only the brave and the bold shall claim their prize." The crowd erupted in laughter and low murmurs of interest. Men jostled for position, each imagining the power and prestige they would gain by claiming the young women lined up like prizes. But Elijah did not move. He did not laugh. He did not reach for a coin or even consider himself part of the spectacle. His gaze, however, fell on the girl in shackles, and something stirred within him that he could neither name nor resist. She was not like the others. Her presence was raw, unyielding, and untouched by the greed that surrounded her. There was a story behind her eyes, he realized, a story of loss, of suffering, of a life stolen by forces beyond her control. And in that realization, Elijah felt the unmistakable tug of responsibility, the kind that rises from the depths of one's conscience, demanding action when all else seems indifferent. He walked forward, slow and deliberate, drawing the attention of the auctioneer and the men who had been sizing up potential brides. "I choose her," Elijah said simply, his voice cutting through the din of the crowd. A collective gasp rose. The auctioneer's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, do you know what you're doing? This girl, she's not, well, she's—" "I know exactly what I'm doing," Elijah interrupted, his tone firm. "She will not be chosen by you, or by anyone here, as if she were a commodity. She will come with me, or she will remain here. But she will not be sold like cattle." The crowd murmured, some laughing nervously, others shifting uncomfortably. Yet Elijah's eyes never left the girl's. He extended his hand to the shackles, and with the help of a few men who dared to obey his command, he unlocked them. For a moment, she simply stared at him, her expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a guarded hope. In her world, acts of kindness were rare, fleeting, and often dangerous. Yet here was a man who had chosen her, not for possession, not for display, but for her humanity. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "Because it's the right thing to do," Elijah said, his voice softening. "Because no one should be treated like property. Because I believe that even in this world, there are people who still remember what it means to care for another human being." Her eyes flickered with something resembling trust. She did not reach for him, did not cling. She simply nodded, allowing herself to be guided away from the auction square, away from the jeering crowd, away from a world that had known cruelty and apathy in equal measure. As they rode out of Red River, the wind whipping across the plains, Elijah learned her name, Ayesha. She spoke little, her words measured, cautious. She had been captured during a raid, taken from her family, and brought to this town with promises of marriage that were nothing more than a cruel pretense. Yet she had survived, holding on to her dignity as her most valuable possession. Elijah listened, not with judgment, but with the quiet patience of someone who had witnessed hardship himself. He shared little of his own past, though she could sense the grief that lingered behind his eyes, a grief not of failure, but of loss, of understanding the fragility of life and the preciousness of every human soul. Days turned into weeks as they traveled together, moving through the vast, unending plains. Along the way, they encountered both danger and kindness, bandits whose hearts were softened by Ayesha's quiet courage, settlers whose generosity reminded Elijah that humanity was never entirely lost. And through it all, a bond formed, not of ownership or obligation, but of mutual respect, of shared understanding, and of a deepening empathy that neither had anticipated. One evening, as they camped beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Ayesha spoke of her dreams, the ones she had hidden even from herself. "I want to see the rivers that flow like silver, the mountains that touch the clouds," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "I want to know a life where fear is not my companion, where kindness is not a rarity." Elijah nodded. "Then we will find that life," he promised. "Not because the world owes us, but because we owe it to ourselves to live with courage and compassion." Their journey eventually brought them to a small settlement near a river, a place where the community was tight-knit but open-hearted. Here, they found work, built shelter, and began the slow, deliberate process of healing. Ayesha learned to trust again, her laughter gradually replacing the shadows that had haunted her expression. Elijah, too, found a measure of peace, knowing that his act of defiance against the cruelty of Red River had not been in vain. Months later, word of their story spread. People came to hear how a cowboy had chosen a girl in Shackles, not for wealth, not for status, but for her humanity. And while some remained skeptical, many were inspired, reminded that even in a harsh and often indifferent world, acts of genuine kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways impossible to predict. One crisp morning, Ayesha and Elijah stood together by the river, watching the sunlight dance on the water's surface. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the calm and strength that had blossomed in her since their journey began. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, her voice quiet but probing. Elijah shook his head, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Never. Choosing you wasn't about ownership or desire, it was about seeing a person for who they truly are, and standing up for what's right. That choice changed both our lives." Ayesha reached out, taking his hand. "And what if others never understand?" "They will understand in time," he replied. "Or they won't. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that we chose compassion when it was needed most." And in that moment, under the vast, endless sky, the two of them understood something profound. That true freedom was not in chains, nor in wealth, nor in the approval of a crowd. It was in the courage to act with kindness, the bravery to see another's suffering, and the willingness to change the world, even if only for one person at a time. As they rode along the riverbank, the sun warming their backs and the horizon stretching endlessly before them, they carried with them a lesson more valuable than gold, more enduring than fame, that humanity is measured not by what we take, but by what we give, and that even in the darkest moments, a single act of compassion can illuminate the path toward hope, healing, and a life lived fully. The story of Elijah and Ayesha became a quiet legend, whispered from town to town, not as a tale of conquest or romance, but as a testament to the enduring power of empathy, courage, and the simple, transformative act of seeing another human being and choosing to do what is right. And somewhere in the endless plains, under skies both stormy and serene, their journey continued, not as an end, but as a living promise that even in a world marred by cruelty, love, kindness, and humanity could always find a way to prevail.